Welcome back to another episode of Investies. This week on the podcast, we are going to unpack some important economic data that has been released, and we are also going to discuss some news articles that are tied to this economic data. On January 25th, we received the GDP numbers for Q4 in 2023. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. In simple terms, GDP measures how the economy is doing during a given period. It was developed after the Great Depression as a way for policymakers to get a gauge on how we were recovering from the Great Depression. GDP is released every quarter, and in addition to letting us know if we are growing on a quarter-to-quarter basis, it also lets us know if we are officially in a recession. 2 consecutive negative quarters of GDP signals a recession in the economy. In addition to being an indicator of a recession, GDP is also used by the White House and Congress to prepare the federal budget. We really do have a lot riding on the GDP. GDP numbers came out at the end of January, and they were much better than expected. So similar to when we have analysts analyzing expectations for quarterly earnings on a publicly traded company, we also have dedicated analysts that determine how much we should expect GDP to grow in the next quarter. And so for Q4 in 2023, analysts were forecasting that GDP would grow by 2%. We blew that number out of the water. GDP grew by 3.3%. And in the previous quarter, Q3 of 2023, we grew by 4.9%. And just to put this growth into perspective, we haven't seen GDP growth like this in about 10 quarters. Based on GDP, this very important metric that is used to make crucial decisions, it sounds like we're doing great, like we're thriving. But are we? Are we really? How are you doing? How is your household doing? I'm talking about money coming into your household and money leaving your household. Do you have more or less discretionary income? For example, are you feeling like you can buy stuff you don't need, like clothes, movie tickets, or a nice dinner out? If you're an entrepreneur, how is your business doing? Are you seeing revenue numbers drop, or are you seeing them increase? I realize that these questions open the space for a lot of anxiety for many of us. I do want to say that it is really important for us to get clear. As we get clear, we learn, and as we learn, we make the necessary changes to stabilize the spending in our home, to understand strategies so that we aren't caught in a much more challenging predicament in the future. We have to just keep it 100 sometimes. And with money, you have to keep it 100 all of the time. And unfortunately for a lot of us, a trauma response is to not even get clear with money at all. The beauty about money and the beauty about learning about the economy and learning how to multiply money and learning how to protect money you've already made from inflation is you start to understand that money fluctuates. It comes and goes. But the experience you gain adds to the experience you have with money in the future. And so the faster you get clear, the faster you can accelerate in the space. Most of the time, what we fear about money is what we actually don't know. Getting clear about money helps us reduce the fear and spring us into action. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we are going to get into additional data that has been released that gives a little bit of a plot twist on GDP numbers. Investies, speaking of springing into action, this will be the last time I teach Wealth Warrior, the course, virtually, taking place on February 24th and 25th. Head over to my website, inluzwetrust.com, click on the menu, click on Wealth Warrior, the course, so that you can gather all of the information on the course, its curriculum, how much the investment is. It is one of my all-time favorite bodies of work. And it really saddens me to not teach this course anymore. As you all know, I am preparing to become state representative in Texas in 2025, and my attention is needed elsewhere. And so this is one of those things that saddens me to let go of, but it is most definitely time. If you want to take advantage of being in an intimate setting with me and being able to ask me any questions you have as I divulge 10 hours of information over the course of 2 days, then join us February 24th and 25th. InLuzWeTrust.com for more information. And we're back. The New York Federal Reserve reported last Tuesday that credit card delinquencies have increased by 59% in Q4 for 2023. Debt increased by consumers to $17.5 trillion. What's worse is that the debt has transitioned into serious delinquency. Serious delinquency is when debt is past due 90 days. This is increased in multiple categories, but the highest category is credit cards, which makes perfect sense. As we have the Fed's increasing interest rates, the interest rates that increase the most are in credit cards. I want to remind you that the data of $17.5 trillion in increase in credit card and the 90-day serious delinquencies that have increased by 59% is data that is measured in Q4 of 2023, the same quarter where we had positive growth in GDP, and the quarter before that, we blew it out of the water with 4.9% increase in GDP. Let's just process this for a minute. As we process this, an important factor to take into consideration about GDP is that the growth in GDP accounts for debt. Meaning, if you are making purchases with your credit card, our GDP is increasing and accounting for growth. GDP is flawed and is unable to separate what was purchased with an actual asset, with cash money that you have in the bank, or what is purchased with a credit card. We tack on high interest rates, increasing interest rates, maxed out credit cards, credit card delinquency on top of that. It feels like we have a serious problem. It's kind of giving 2008 housing crisis when we had the majority of the American population in a balloon loan. Additional data coming in is also highlighting that the middle class is disappearing. The gap between the uber rich and the poor is widening. Common folks are having to deal with high interest rates and inflation. Unfortunately, the only tool we have to eradicate inflation is even higher interest rates. It's important for us to pay attention to the reality that is taking place and make sure that we are safeguarding the assets that we currently have, making, of course, informed decisions. I want to be very clear. I am not a fan of discussing money in a restrictive way. I'm not a fan of looking at money from a restrictive lens. I feel that that can be very triggering. I feel that that can create and amplify a negative relationship with money. I think it's just important for us to continuously take responsibility and look at the reality of our situation and make better decisions moving forward. There's a really powerful analogy on credit cards that really helped me change my perspective on them. Credit cards are like fire. It can help you cook a meal or it can burn your house down. We have to be cognizant of when we are cooking a meal and when we are burning our house down. Credit cards can be extremely beneficial in helping you build credit. We need them. You can also utilize credit cards in a way that can bring in more money in terms of points and other benefits that a credit card can bring in. We can take advantage of credit cards when there's 0% interest to make payments on a big expense. There are so many pros to credit cards, so I don't want us to feel afraid of them. However, we do have to respect them and understand that they have the power of wiping out all of our economic power, especially in this country where we lean so much on credit. I'm sorry that this wasn't a positive or uplifting episode. Sometimes experiencing a positive outcome is because we've dealt with a negative situation at hand. All of this data is alarming to me, and I would see it as a disservice if I didn't share it with you. I want this episode to serve as an invitation for you all to review the revenue that is coming into your households and the expenses and costs that are leaving. I want us to make sure that we are protecting our families and making proper decisions. All of this data may not be directly affecting your household, and that is amazing. But it is still important for us to be aware of what is taking place economically around us so that we can make strategic decisions. Since data also shows that the ones that are the most affected by this are people of color. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia. Investies is a Cosmic Standard and In Luz We Trust production. A special thank you to the team, Asia Simpson, Eliza Smith, and Jacob Winnick.